Welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you are joining us for our August Thursday FPA Connect webinar. We have a really fantastic topic with a really amazing presenter, Jennifer Rubin. She's going to talk to us about salary secrets, negotiating your value. You always hear us talk about knowing your worth at AFCPE. So Jen Rubin's going to help us have some more information about that today. I do want to remind you to post your questions in the chat. We're going to answer those questions at the end of the webinar today. That's a little bit different than what we do sometimes, but I'm going to help Jen with those questions at the end of today's presentation. And we do ask that you keep your questions and your conversation relevant to today's presentation, and we ask that everyone please be kind and respectful of others. Our anti-harassment policy is in place in all of our AFCPE spaces, so please be kind and respectful to others and to our presenter. And we do not allow artificial intelligence to be in the presentation for you. So I will be removing any AI assistants who might be joining us in place of you. But we're so excited for Jen to be here. We'll give you that CEU code at the end, and there will also be a slide with some discounts. So you're going to want to hang around to the very end for that CEU code and some discounts. But Jennifer, we're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say today.
Thank you, and greetings to everybody. That's an interesting note about AI. I want you all to know that this is coming to you from a real human, developed by human, and it's for humans. So I hope you all enjoy that. I am Jen Rubin. I'm a bicoastal employment lawyer. I practice at Mintz. I have been practicing for over 30 years, and the nature of my practice is representing companies and executives in employment and equity arrangements. I litigate and try employment cases when the case may be, and I invite you at your leisure, if you'd like to learn more about me and my practice, you should feel free to check in with my bio at my firm, Mintz. As well as connect with me on LinkedIn. I am based in San Diego, so it is morning here for me. But I also, as mentioned, I do practice also in New York, as well as my practice is national in scope. And I'm thrilled to be here today. And a few housekeeping notes for all of you. The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of mine and my firm, and they do not necessarily represent the views or opinions of any organizers who asked me to join you. So I just want to make that clear. And I also would like to provide you with some information about some discount codes for FPA members. You can see those codes here. I will pause. I believe the slides will be made available after the presentation, but it looks like you all have the opportunity for further education at a discounted rate, which is great for you. So terrific. Let's just move on then. I'd like to start by outlining the agenda for this 1-hour program, and I will be very respectful of your time, and I will finish promptly at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. The agenda today, I'll be speaking about the role of the financial advisor in employment negotiations, and I'm assuming that would involve or may involve each and every one of you. I'd like to spend a little bit of time defining and understanding the compensation package. That has a very distinct meaning to me as an employment lawyer, and I will be discussing that with you. Part of the reason is to enable you and give you the tools to better understand some of the options that may be available to individuals that you are counseling about these matters. And then the end of the presentation will be focused on the what we call the salary secrets, which is how to negotiate compensation. And I'll be sharing with you some tips and ideas and strategies for how to negotiate compensation. And by the way, whether you can use it for yourself or your clients. And then I'm hoping that we have 5 minutes, maybe more at the end for Q&A. So please hang on to your questions, or you could post them in the chat, and we can address them at the end of the presentation. In my experience with this particular presentation, a lot of the questions that come up, I do end up answering later on in the slides, but feel free to go ahead and put your questions in the chat. So let's start at the beginning. maximizing compensation. I know most people are interested in maximizing compensation, at least for those of us who do work for wages. So let's talk about where it begins. And in terms of relevance to this audience, I'm going to call them career discussions. Certainly, financial advisors don't necessarily have career discussions about coaching an individual as to what type of careers to pursue. However, there are elements of those discussions, I think, that are distinctly relevant to individuals like you who perform these functions, important functions for people who are out there in the working world. And so I'd like to talk about when and how and why to have those discussions with your clients. I'd like to help you understand the concept of a compensation resume. Some of you may be very unfamiliar with that term. It's something I think I've coined. I've not seen it anywhere else. But it's important to understand that an individual's compensation over the course of their career, that is part of their compensation resume, and that can impact earnings. It can impact decisions about whether to take certain jobs. It can impact decisions relating to, how to balance compensation in terms of wages, bonuses, equity, and things of that nature. So I call it a compensation resume because it really is part of the person's history, and it's important for clients to understand the meaning of that history and the impact on future careers. Now, one of the things I'd like to talk about is I call it what you don't know. Effective negotiations always begin with a client's understanding of the client's value. Now, some people tend to provide themselves with a greater value than the reality of the marketplace. And some people, and particularly, sadly to say, this is a gender-specific concept that actually the data supports that women are less likely to assign themselves a greater value when it comes to these things. But there is a market value, right? The market will set an individual's value based upon the person's skills, education, background, and most importantly, what a particular employer is looking to hire and why. And all of those things can set the value regardless of whether the person is, indicating that they think their value is less, or there are some individuals who think their value is far more than what the market sets. So understanding how to have an effective compensation negotiation really does require an understanding of what that value is. And I'll be talking about that in the course of this program. I wanted to first share a few statistics that I thought are really, really interesting to me. So the Pew Research Center, very well-known nonprofit, did a poll in 2023 regarding asking for higher pay. And you'll see males are slightly more likely than females, 32% to 28%, to say they did ask for higher pay than what was originally offered. This is in, private sector employment. And among those who asked for higher pay, and this is males and females, 28% say they were given the pay they asked for. 38% say they were given more than what was originally offered, but perhaps less than what they asked for. And 35% say they were only given what was first offered. Now, this is astonishing to me, okay? Because if you think about it, you multiply these percentages by somebody who's negotiating a salary of $100,000 or very high income earners of $500,000 or more. Just think about these percentages and what this can do to an individual's compensation resume and earning potential, right? Because if you're building on salaries as you move forward in your career, if you don't negotiate, think about the money that's being left on the table. I just think this is a very important statistic to keep in mind. And I will be talking in the course of this program about some of the things that do hold people back and some of the concerns they have. But my takeaway, hopefully your takeaway, is that people really ought to seriously consider having these negotiations when they have these job offers. And then again, those who rely on employment to build wealth, and not all of your clients do, but many do, really will materially benefit from negotiating for more robust compensation package. So I want to encourage everybody participating in this program or for your own clients to think about how you can help them do that. Building wealth, right? That's a big part of what this is. Now, when I was asked to do this program, my first question is, what are you trying to accomplish through presenting a program like this? And the response led me to your mission statement, the mission statement of AFCPE, which is to positively impact the financial well-being of all people by ensuring the highest standards for financial counseling, coaching, and education. All of these things make perfect sense to me in terms of the roles that you play for your clients. And together with that, part of the mission statement, we believe in a future where everyone has equitable access to high quality financial counseling, coaching, and education with the opportunity to achieve lasting financial well-being. Well, these are, wonderful missions to have in terms of the value, the incredible material impact you can have on your clients' lives by encouraging your clients to engage in these negotiations. Again, armed with the education to do this. So I think this is terrific that I was asked to do this, and I think it dovetails really perfectly with the mission statement of this organization. So let's dive into that a little bit. What is the role of a financial advisor in compensation negotiations? Well, counseling, obviously you're all counselors, right? You use your expertise, knowledge, and capabilities to understand what your client wants to achieve, right? And those goals might include career aspirations. They may include, do I need additional education to reach my goals? Are there other activities that I need to engage in to build financial wealth? Assuming that that's why people are hiring folks like you, for assistance. So understanding what your client's goals are obviously is a key part of what you do. The education perspective, making the effort to expand your knowledge base, because then you can bring that knowledge base to your clients and, you could put in the work and help them put in the work. And I'm going to talk about what type of work they ought to be doing in a few minutes. But I do think the education is a big part of this. And then obviously the coaching, right? This is where, having somebody hear somebody on, give them the information, give them the confidence, right? And confidence comes from understanding the terminology and the power that individuals really have. And I know it may sound a little crazy to say that, do or don't they have power, but they really do. Okay, so I'd like to briefly talk about components of compensation, which you may hear people talk about as the package or the compensation package. Now, the things that I have on this slide, these are very broad components. I think everybody understands what a paycheck is. Salary, base pay, wages. This is the amount of money that hopefully is coming in as cash. There are a lot of laws relating to when companies try to quote unquote pay in equity, which there's certain amounts of money that have to be paid in cash. But we all understand what a paycheck is. It's the regular income that's coming to you to compensate an individual for the services that they perform for an employer. And then, of course, we have equity. We all understand what equity is. It, takes the form of stock options, restricted stock units, which are becoming very popular. But equity can take a lot of different forms and can be really important components of wealth building. Could also be really big components of risk, as we know, because equity can turn out to be worth exactly nothing. So there is a risk factor there. Commissions, typically it's cash payments for sales-related activities is the commission terminology. And then bonuses, right? And bonuses can be a lot of different things, like cash, equity, or a lot of companies give a combination of cash and equity. And just so you're conversant and understand with understanding the terminology, a non-discretionary bonus is, if X happens, you get Y. If the company's EBITDA is $10 million or more, every single employee is going to get a $1,000 bonus. That's a non-discretionary bonus, by the way, extremely unusual, right? A lot of companies don't do that. What is far more customary? A discretionary bonus. We all understand what discretionary means. The general terminology is that the employer makes the decision, but there could be subcomponents of that, depending how the individual's performance, depending on a division's performance, depending on the company's performance. Sometimes it depends upon the overall economy and the employer's outlook for the, coming year. So discretionary can mean a lot of things, but in my experience as an employment lawyer, 99% of the bonuses that you see or your clients will see in an offer letter will be discretionary in nature. And then, of course, there's signing bonuses, and some of you may be familiar with what a signing bonus is. Typically, it's an amount of money. It's usually cash. Sometimes it's stock. Sometimes it's both to induce somebody to accept an offer. And in my experience, a signing bonus, and I'll talk about this a little later, can be used to what I call close the gap between a salary that's offered and perhaps a salary that is requested. So signing bonuses, I kind of consider them to be a little bit of funny money because you can use them because the employer may have a little bit more flexibility because they don't have to lock somebody in at a salary. A signing bonus might be a one-time payment. The downside is it's a one-time payment. It does not build the compensation resume. So I'm not a huge fan of signing bonuses. I'd rather see individuals get a higher salary, which I think ultimately is more to their benefit for a lot of reasons. So let's talk about some of the other components of the package that provide significant tax benefits. And I know you as financial advisors definitely appreciate the importance of having those benefits because, we don't want to hand over money to the government that we don't necessarily have to. So obviously health, dental insurance, vision insurance, these are federally regulated benefits that are almost always tax advantaged, right? I say almost always because there are mistakes that are made when employers design plans. That's a whole other seminar, but the point is that this is something that can be very valuable to clients. Flexible spending accounts, health savings accounts, the latter, HSAs, becoming incredibly popular and a wonderful way to shelter money from taxes, and at the same time have money available for things that everybody needs, whether it's prescription medications, over-the-counter medications, co-pays, things like that. And again, a very heavily federally regulated area because it depends on income and there are certain limits and things like that. But a really, really important part of a tax favorable benefit that can be offered. 401k, you're all familiar, I hope, with the fact that relates to a provision of the Internal Revenue Code that allows you to set aside money for retirement. Obviously, a very restricted in terms of what you're able to do with the money and age restricted and so on and so forth. I won't spend a lot of time talking about that other than to say, if any of your clients come to you with a job offer with a 401k where there's an employer match that's offered, my view of that is, hey, that's free money and that is a wonderful benefit. And if that's being offered, that's a take it and run. So that's a really wonderful benefit to have. A few other just brief mentions. Some employers offer like transit passes where you can, put money in a tax advantaged account. Parking, life insurance can be employer offered, long and short-term disability insurance, long-term care insurance, tuition reimbursement. These are just a few of the benefits that sometimes a client will come and say, hey, the salary is not what I'm looking for. But then when you break it down and you start looking at the components of what they've been offered and the tax favorable things, tax favorable status of these things, it's important to sit down and really understand that, because even though that may not build wealth in terms of cash in the account, it's a great way to avoid paying excessive and unnecessary taxes. So those are parts of the package that I think are important for anybody to focus on when they're thinking about a negotiation. Now, I just want to pause for a moment because I do think this is an important slide, this one and the next one. When we think of a career, I call it a perceived career, right? That you start at the bottom, you work your way up, and then you reach this kind of mountaintop of, here it is. I finally made it. Here's the money shot. I think that's what everybody's perception of a career is. But this, I think, is actually the reality of what a career is. And the reason why I think this is important is that when people come to you and they say, hey, I have this incredible opportunity and it's going to allow me to develop X, Y, and Z skills, right? But it's a step back. I'm taking a step back in compensation, or I'm taking a step back in title, or whatever it may be. I think, giving somebody the freedom to think about the long-term aspects of the career, that sometimes it's just messy and sometimes you may need to take a step back so that you can take that step forward. And I know you're thinking, well, you've just been talking about this compensation resume. Yes, it is important to understand where your progression is in terms of compensation. But my point here is that there are many instances where there's a job offer and the benefits that come with the job offer because of whether it's an incredible educational opportunity, it may be working with an unbelievable manager who's going to provide amazing mentorship. And there's a whole host of things that go into this decision that add to this kind of slide of sometimes it's just a little messier than it may seem. And that's okay. As long as you take the step back and you do the counseling for the client on, hey, what are your goals? What's important to you? And by the way, you're all going to realize this. Those goals will change over time, right? In the person's own life cycle. But I think it's important to let go of this kind of concept that the career only goes up. Sometimes the career is just like this, and that's fine. So I want to take a pause and talk about how you as financial advisors can add value to negotiations. And I think in order to understand that, it's important to understand when to get involved with your clients when it comes to salary negotiations. I think, I'm sure many of you, when you do client intake for a new client, you have a new client who comes to you and you have to get to know that client. I don't think you can perform your services without actually speaking to your client about what's important to them, again, at that stage in life. And then the value add that you have is to let people know, well, you're going to be entering into other stages. And part of this is planning for those stages and thinking about where you may want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. But talking about what's important to the client in terms of their job and their career and how they see their career unfolding, a great time to do that is at the initial onboarding. And that, by the way, will help with these negotiations. Many of you, in fact, I'm sure all of you have regular client check-ins when you have conversations with your clients, not because they call you about a particular thing. Hey, I need to buy a life insurance policy, or I'm thinking about investing in this investment. I'm thinking about buying real estate. These kind of important life moments that people have where they really lean on their financial advisor. But those regular check-ins, how's it going? How's your job? Are you learning the things that you want to be learning? Are you progressing the way that you'd like to progress? What is the next title? Where do you fit in the org chart? And are you happy with that? I think there's really tremendous value that you can add because I think people sometimes have trouble taking that step back, right? They're focused on that career progression up instead of understanding how messy it can be. So you can really provide a tremendous amount of value in having those conversations. When to get involved, I say not when the client calls about a job offer, because that's not the time to understand what your client wants, right? They're going to be excited. They may be under time pressure, and I'll talk about that a little bit further in the program. They may be having trouble focusing on what's important. But if you've had those previous conversations with them, I really think you can add a tremendous amount of value in understanding how to go about negotiating their compensation within the context of these goals and these things that are important to the client. So these are the timing on the adding value. So let's talk about some of the what's that can be negotiated other than the package, because they're going to come to you with, hey, I have an offer, and this is what my offer is. Some of the things that you really want to think about asking, severance and other, I call it executive level benefits. I'm an employment lawyer. I've been practicing for a long time. I will tell you that I'm going to call them rank and file employees, which are most employees who are kind of non-C-suite folks, generally are not offered severance. A lot of companies do not generally have severance plans unless they're very, very large companies for their employees. But there's no harm in asking your client about that, or to ask your client, do you want to consider asking about that? So it can be an important fact to know, but I just want you all to understand it's not something that really typically comes with an offer to people who are non-C-suite folks. By the way, not everybody in the C-suite even has a severance offer that's part of their, whether it's an offer letter or an employment contract that's provided. But think about that. Non-competes. I'm sure many of you are familiar. Non-competes are really in the news now. We have the Federal Trade Commission that has indicated that it wants to put in place a proposed rule that will ban many non-competes, not all non-competes. And by the way, those rules do not trump state rules. Of course, we have 50 different jurisdictions in the country of states, and then we have the federal government. So the most restrictive law will apply to these issues. I sit here in California. Many of you may be familiar with the fact that California is really funny about non-competes, just doesn't enforce them, generally speaking. But asking your client, have you been asked to sign one, and understanding that is really, really important. Because if somebody's locked up from performing certain work in their industry in a certain geographic location, they will want to know that when they receive a job offer, because that can be really, really significant. I don't know what's going to happen with the FTC ban. Let me just talk about that very quickly. Multiple lawsuits have been filed to enjoin it from going into effect. There has been no U.S.-wide injunction that has yet been issued. We're waiting for a decision out of a court in Texas that's supposed to come on August 30th. That's supposed to address the greater injunction around the country. So it's still an open question. What I'd like you all to take away from these comments here is that I'd like you to be aware of it. It will be all over the news. Don't worry, it'll be in the papers, but to make sure that your clients are aware of it, right? And so I think it's really, people overlook this, and I think it's a very important aspect of compensation negotiations. By the way, these things can be negotiated. Other things, and obviously remote work is a big deal, post-COVID. For some people, travel is a big deal. They don't want to travel for a variety of reasons. So understanding what a job requires is important. And by the way, that's a big part of your discussions with your client about what's important to them. And then, other people may have other requirements and things that are important. Again, this comes out of those discussions when you speak to your clients and you are asking them these questions, teaching, writing, involvement in certain charitable endeavors or other nonprofit service, and making sure if those things are important to your clients, that those things are preserved in these negotiations. So I just wanted to make sure that we focused on that for a moment. Okay, so let's now talk about how to lay the groundwork for these compensation conversations, which, by the way, I fully admit are extremely awkward for everybody. I'm a employment lawyer, been practicing a long time, and I recognize that discussing your compensation with another human is really hard to do. It's awkward. You're afraid of, being told what, quote unquote, your value is as a result of compensation. I think I just want to stop and recognize that very human feeling of having these conversations is difficult. But let's back up and talk about how you can support your clients by asking them, who have you spoken to at the company about the compensation? It's important to understand that. What research that have you done? This is probably the most important component because the question of how you've leveraged the wage transparency movement. So let's just back up a moment. Many states have now passed laws that actually require employers to post publicly, whether it's on their website, on any, website where they're advertising on the internet, wherever it may be, to post the salary range for a particular position. So this is pretty groundbreaking. This movement started about 5 years ago. And I don't know that it occurred to anybody, but it's an incredibly useful source of information. So, for example, we have this statute that's in effect here in California, also in New York. Even if your client is looking at a job offer in Kansas, say, for a company that does certain things and the position is similar, you could go to these other states, and even for that employer, you can look up different salaries that they are advertising, their salary ranges, generally speaking, almost always, for that particular position. So if you think about it, it is a treasure trove of information about who's paying what to whom. Because when those ranges are posted, that is going to tell you what is the range you really should be working within for a particular position. So when I say, what research have you done? A lot of that research can take place, sitting down at a computer. And I know there's the whole black hole you go into with Google and everything else, but I think that there's a lot of information out there that people don't realize that you can use, okay? other parts of the compensation conversations to speak to a client. Where will this position lead you? Where is this in your trajectory, whether your trajectory is up or whether it's the messy trajectory? What is it that you ultimately want to do? Where do you see yourself? And how does this job help you get there? A lot of clients don't think about that. They're just excited about the job offer, or they're excited about the company, or whatever it may be. But you always need to put it in the context of, where is this going to help you in your career in terms of what's important to you? And again, granted, at that time. But I think one of the roles, an important role that you can play, is helping the person to take a step back and be a little more objective, right? Take away the shiny things and really focus on what is necessary for you in your life. And of course, how much can you afford? State and federal taxes, cost of living, what's important. Are you the sole support for your family? Is it a dual income or more? What are the schools like in the location that you're looking to work or maybe relocate? What is the weather like? I mean, I've had people say to me, I won't live in X, Y, and Z. I don't want to live in a cold place. I want to live in a warm place. It's important to me. Sometimes that's health related, by the way. So that's another important aspect. Some people have hobbies where they want to be in a certain location, or they want to have time to pursue them, right? So all these things, I think, go into this ultimate question of, why this job? Why do you want to take this job? By the way, the answer to that question could be, I just need a job and I've been looking forever. You know what? Sometimes that's good enough. Sometimes you just need to be employed. It's easier to find a new job when you're already employed, and it's easier to try to build skills in a job rather than, you're just at home looking for work. So I also recognize that sometimes the answer is, I just need a job. And that, you know what? If that's the answer, that's the answer. My goal here is to make sure that all of these questions are asked, because I really do think these questions are relevant to the salary negotiation discussion. Okay, so now let's turn to the part of the program I think most people are waiting for, which is negotiating offers. And I want to provide a few tips about negotiating offers. The first is, I always tell my clients to get it in writing. Now, what do I mean by that? So when somebody goes through a job interview process, right, they're an applicant and they're being interviewed. Let's back up. Before they even start looking at the job, they may know the salary range because they're working in one of those jurisdictions where it has to be posted, or they may have a really good sense for what the salary range is, okay? So the person's not going to, most people won't go into a job having zero idea of what the salary range is and what they're looking at. So they should know that. And in fact, a lot of people will have informal discussions in the course of the interview process, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So they're not going into this blindly. They're not going into this without, having the information at their disposal. But where I think people make mistakes is they start negotiating in that context without seeing the actual, whether it's an offer letter, whether it's an employment contract. By the way, it could come through email, almost always through email these days. It could come through one of these secure servers where you have to log in order to see what the job offer is. I don't care what form it takes. What I want to know are these things. What is the job you're being offered? You'd be astonished how many people are told, we want to hire you and we want you to start on September 4th and we're going to pay you $100,000 a year. It's like, hire me as what? What am I doing? What is my position? And by the way, sometimes they'll indicate who the person's going to be reporting to, which can also be an important thing to know. Salary, obviously you want to know what you're going to get paid, right? It could be expressed annually, monthly. For some employees who are receiving an offer that's for a non-exempt position, otherwise known as an hourly position, it may be expressed as an hourly rate of pay, but it should be in that document how much is being offered. Benefits details. So I think it's very common for benefits details to actually not be in the offer letter, but have the offer letter reference. You're going to receive the benefits that are outlined and then there's a 50-page attachment. I think that's typically what happens these days. But at least to understand, am I being offered an opportunity to participate in a health insurance plan? Does the company have a 401k plan? Does the company match? Is there a waiting period, right? Does the company have an HSA? I mean, these are the things that I think are important to know at the time. Um, is there a bonus? Will I be eligible for a bonus? Will I be eligible to participate in a bonus plan? Even if it's a discretionary bonus, you want to know. Is there a percentage bonus that I'll be eligible for? You want to know. And obviously equity, to the extent equity is being offered, and of course this brings it to a whole different level of complication, but you want to know, what is the nature of the equity? Is it a stock option? Is it an RSU? You want to know, how many shares. You want to know what the vesting restrictions are. Even better, you want to see the stock option plan or the equity plan that goes along with the equity, right? That will allow you to really understand what it is. Is there anything that your client told you is super important to the client? If so, that needs to be in the offer letter. And finally, time restrictions for acceptance. Excuse me. It's almost always artificial, right? Sometimes employees think, oh, I'm being pressured to sign this in 24 hours. I'm being told, sign this in 24 hours or else. Usually the reason there's a time period for acceptance is because there are other candidates out there who need to be, quote unquote, kept warm, right? So if your client turns down the offer, the company needs to know that they can go to another candidate. These can almost always be negotiated, i.e., I need to talk to my family, my advisors, can I have a few more days? Can I have another week? So that's an important thing to know, that it can almost always be negotiated. But the point is, you want all of these material terms. Again, each client, what's material is different, depends upon each person. Before you go back and negotiate, you want to see them on the page. You never want to negotiate piecemeal. This is why you do it. You want to pick, what are the things that's important to me? And the only way that I can go back and do something about it is by knowing what it is. It's a very, very important point. Here's the next series of very important points in my view. No matter what your client receives, you should counsel your client to express gratitude. Why? Because you're interviewing while you're negotiating. And this is like the type of thing that people's minds go like, wait a minute, but it's true. You're interviewing. Your discussions with a prospective employer about your salary reflects on you, and how you go about doing that reflects on you. And the employer is now forming a judgment about you as an employee. Of course, once you start working, you're now being evaluated as an employee, but this is part of it. And I think people don't really appreciate that. And so starting with expressing gratitude, it's simply saying thank you. Even if the offer is awful, even if it's the worst offer ever, even if the client says, I'm so offended by this, I want to rip it up. You don't do that. You say thank you. Why do you do that? Well, first of all, it's a human and courteous thing to do, but you don't know where this is going, right? Even if your client turns down this offer because it was so ridiculous, you don't know that the client's going to end up in the organization in some other position or somewhere down the road. So it's important that people understand that just saying, the act of saying thank you is important. Here's the other point. You'll see that I have this in bold, because this is something that I am absolutely sure is correct. Never negotiate over email, okay? Email is one-dimensional. It doesn't reflect the enthusiasm that the person has. It is very one-sided. Think about how many emails you receive in a day where you take the email one way and the person meant it another, okay? Enough said. Email is not the way to do it. However, I do recognize that email is very appropriate for things like, would you please send me the confidentiality agreement the offer references, or can you send me the benefits description? Things like that, absolutely. Or, thank you very much for this offer, and you could do this by email. Is there a convenient time for us to discuss the offer over the phone or by Zoom? That's the way to do it, okay? Gratitude, it's courteous, it's prompt, but you're not negotiating. So I don't want to rule email out completely. More guidelines that some people don't know. A job offer can come in all sorts of different ways and manners, right? An HR staffer, it could come from a manager, it could come from an assistant, it could come from the CEO, right? I've had people, receive job offers from a CEO over the phone. So there's a lot of different ways an offer can come, and people need to understand they need to be prepared for everything. But people need to understand that the chain of command absolutely has to be respected, right? Even if you're dealing with a recruiter or an HR staffer, so to speak, that person may not have the power to make substantive decisions about job negotiation, but keep them in the loop, be deferential to them. They themselves are professionals, even if they're not decision makers. And if the client ends up at the company, you don't want the client to start off on the wrong foot with these individuals. By the way, may have a lot of power. You have no way of knowing. And then this also happens frequently. Who do I talk to? The offer came this way, but I don't know if this is the recruiter. Should I talk to the recruiter, the HR staffer? No problem. Just ask. Hey, I have thank you so much for the offer. I have a couple of questions. Who should I talk to about that? And the client will be told. So these are very important components of how to do this correctly and setting yourself up correctly. Okay, how do you ask for more? Well, you start with emphasizing the interest in and enthusiasm for the organization. You want to make your audience receptive to the ask. Keep in mind, you're probably talking to somebody who works at the company. So when you say, I'm so excited about this job position, I'm excited about the company, you're making the person very receptive to hear you. And this also, again, starts with the gratitude, right? Focus on the value that the person will bring. Remember, you're still interviewing. Even when you're having these discussions about job or compensation negotiations, this is part of the interview process, right? They're forming an impression about your clients, okay? So focusing on the value that the person will bring against the data supporting it. That's the groundwork. I talked about the wage transparency movement. There are different salary.com, Google, there are all sorts of different places to go to do the research on what type of salary ranges are being offered for positions. Having that information there, very, very important when you're going to have these discussions, because that gets to the person's value. So here's some actual language that could be useful. I call this putting the ball in the employer's court. The salary offered wasn't in the range I was expecting based on my conversations with the company. Can you explain the company's thinking in that regard? Now, why do I love this statement? So the best way to have a negotiation is to have somebody tell you why they offered the salary they did. So a response to this could be, well, we told you the range was 100,000 to 120, and you came to us, and we don't really think that you have the skills that really kind of need to be developed to do this particular position. So we put you at the lower end of the range, and we think you're going to work your way up. Okay, what does the client do? The client says, oh, I don't know that you were focused on the fact that I've done X, Y, and Z, which are directly relevant to the skills for this position. By the way, this should always be done with bullet points when the conversation is taking place. And to kind of push back at the company and say, I actually, not only do I think I'm absolutely a right for this company, that I'm going to add value on day one, I think, in fact, based upon my skills and experience, I actually do qualify for the higher end of the range. And so this is a conversation, and this allows the client to glean information from the company about why the salary was actually offered. And then the client can use that information, hopefully to the client's advantage, sometimes not, right? But at least they have the answer to that question, why they were offered what they were offered. Here's another thing that the client can do. I call it exchanging X for Y, right? Let's say that they're offered a relocation sum. We'll pay for you to move across country or whatever it is. And let's say that the client doesn't even need that for some reason. You can ask to exchange the relocation sum, let's say for a signing bonus, or in my opinion, it's always better to try to go for a higher salary or maybe an additional equity grant, right? So it's exchanging things. And this goes back to, why did I say I want it in writing first? You need to know what you can exchange for, right? You want to know what's being offered so that you can understand, hey, maybe these things aren't as important to me, and I can trade them in order to get something that is important to me. There's absolutely no harm in approaching it this way. Again, if these kind of simple rules are followed, expressing gratitude, being prepared, making sure that you're speaking to the right person, and you're not doing this over email. And now you can understand, if you need to have give and take in this conversation, that give and take really cannot happen over email. So a few other kind of basics here. In California, and by the way, quite a few other states now, an applicant cannot be asked about their prior salary. So you're all thinking, well, you're just talking about the compensation resume and how important that is. that relates to ultimately, what the client's goals are in building out title and position that could actually be relevant in the future. But in this instance, people cannot be asked what your salary is, because the thinking is that then the company's going to use that to kind of undercut or only maybe give them a little bit of a raise. And that could lead to, gender and other inequalities in pay. So this is part of the wage transparency movement. If somebody is asked, they should be asked about their salary expectations, and clients should always respond with a range. Okay. Really important that the client understand the difference between a range and a firm number. A firm number should never be given. The firm number is given, that's the number you get, and then there's nothing to negotiate. I see this mistake made all the time, by the way, and that's okay. But people should understand about a range. What is the range supposed to be? Is it a $100,000 range for a $200,000 position? Clearly not, right? Something that could be in the range of reasonableness. For a $200,000 position, maybe the range is $20,000 or $30,000, right? So people need to do the research to understand, again, what the salary ranges look like, because they may be able to find this particular company posting somewhere else. Use that information in coming up with a number. The other thing that people need to understand if they are asked illegal questions, and believe me, this happens all the time, to deflect it, right? Somebody, gets a question, well, what are you making now? Well, what I'm interested in, here's the answer. What I'm actually interested in is the salary range for individuals in my position, and what is the range that the company is offering and why? What are the skills that the company is looking for, right? You turn it back to a conversation about value, skills, what this person is bringing to this particular position. Why is the company looking for these skills? Very, very important. This is part of the research and the preparation. This, by the way, is the secret sauce to all of it. All of it. Preparation and also attitude and approach. Excuse me. Important that clients don't get distracted by, I call them shiny things. My favorite or least favorite shiny thing is when the recruiter comes back and says, I'm so excited. I've got a package value for you of $200,000. And the client's like, wow, that's so exciting. And then all of a sudden the offer letter comes over. And in fact, the base salary is $120,000. And, there's a discretionary bonus of $20,000, equity that may be worth, nothing. And then all of a sudden the cost of benefits that are provided by the employer are being rolled into this dollar figure. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. That makes zero sense. I mean, it's a common number. And many of you may know this, that the cost to employers of providing benefits anywhere, let's call it 20 to 30% or more. That's not a number that you should share with an employee. They don't care. Okay. So don't let people get distracted by package values. I don't think much of that term. I'm interested in the concrete things. And by the way, concrete things can include equity depending on the circumstances. But not the package value. I don't think that's a worthwhile term. Word choice. This kind of goes back to the human part of this that I think it's easy to overlook or downplay. Saying things like, I was hoping that my salary would fall in the upper end of the range, or I'm curious why I was offered the lower end of this range, or it'd be helpful for me to have some more data in terms of what other directors of this company are being offered for salary purposes. All of these things are really, really important in terms of, again, you want to spark the conversation. You want to make it a two-way conversation so that the client can get the information to understand how they can use that information to come back to the company and say that they're worth more. I'm trying to understand where the salary fits in for positions like this in this city. Can you explain to me why the company decided to offer me X? I love that. That is an opening to a conversation that allows the client to then leverage the information they are hearing to correct mistakes or to make their play for more money. Like, why are the skills and experience that the client brings would justify them to be at a higher end of a range. And of course, nobody should ever use language like, well, I must receive this, or I made it very clear to the company, I'm not walking away from X, Y, and Z. That type of language is not helpful. And then don't assess blame. Well, the recruiter told me. That one drives me crazy. You know, what you say is, oh, I really misunderstood because from my conversation with the recruiter, I had thought the range was X, Y, and Z. And can we spend a few minutes talking about that? Again, talking, conversation, two ways. Getting information by asking for it in a very courteous way really will help people move forward in these discussions. And again, this is all part of the interview process. So really important to somebody's career at a particular organization. So where does the proposed salary fall within the employer's salary range? Was I in the upper end of the range or the lower end? Totally appropriate to ask that. Titles. Sometimes clients are offered one title or position. Possible that there's another title or position that might actually bring more money. So asking about it, the way to ask, what would be the next natural progression for me in my career at this company if I start out as a director, right? That's awesome because again, you're now having a conversation and you can utilize that information. Predicting future value. So maybe you're not happy with the salary now, but can we have a review in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? So I can show you what I can do. And I think I'd love to sit down and reassess my value at that time. I love that. That's a great way to do this. And then using the signing bonus request to close the gap, because sometimes the company will say, this is our range. This is what's been approved by finance, right? We can't go outside a budget for this, or we have 20 other directors who are within this range. And to have the client say, I really, really want to take this position, but it is a miss on my salary expectations. Can we close the gap with a signing bonus? I'm not crazy about doing that just because it's not part of the person's compensation. But sometimes, it's nice to get a little bit of something, especially if it's in cash. Some concerns your clients may raise with you. Will they revoke the offer if you negotiate? Or will I look bad? So the answer to the first question is technically as a legal matter, somebody makes you an offer of a contract and you come back with different terms, like a different salary, you're technically defeating the offering of the contract, right? It doesn't work like that in the real world. It just doesn't. It's a discussion. Most employers appreciate that it's a discussion. Will you look bad? Definitely not. If you follow my guidelines, expressing gratitude, being prepared, doing your research, not negotiating over email, no, you won't look bad. What if you make a mistake? And the most common one is answering the question too soon. What salary are you looking for? Always give a range. That way you're going to give yourself a little bit of room. Never give a number. What if something better comes along after you've accepted? Well, here I have some real views on this. When somebody accepts a job offer, it's a intent to enter into an agreement. It's a sign of good faith. I don't think you can continue to negotiate with other employers once you've accepted a job offer. I know you're at will. You can be terminated anytime for any reason, blah, 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 blah. You tell somebody I'm coming and you've gone through a negotiation, I think you have an obligation to show up and give it a try. But it does happen, and I do see people do that, and I'm not a real fan of that. Other mistakes, not doing the homework. I just talked about that. It's the data. It's out there, right? Use it to your advantage. Leverage it. People lack confidence. You saw the percentages that I put up there in terms of negotiating for salaries. If the person's done their homework and they're qualified for the position, I think that they must negotiate. I think doing the negotiation is an absolute must. It is, it's even if they don't succeed, they're not going to look bad if they follow these simple tools. Expressing gratitude. I think people overlook how those simple, I want to tell you how much I appreciated meeting everybody and taking the time to interview me. I'm really excited about this company and I really appreciate the job offer. Think about how that sets up for a conversation. It just changes the tenor. Sometimes people overlook these really simple things, but it's really important. Here's the other thing. Appreciating how technology has made the business community very small, right? What you say and do in a negotiation may not only be remembered, others may hear about it, right? So I think in this day and age, we all understand about these viral things that go on. Nobody wants to be the subject of that. So conducting yourself in a way that you're proud of what you've done, even if you end up not being successful. Look, it's better to do things above board and as ethically as possible. What about leverage? Well, the best leverage is when somebody solicited, right? I got your name. You're the only person who knows how to do X, Y, and Z. We must have you. Well, that's talent leverage. That's amazing. I don't know how often that happens. It does happen, right? I've had that happen to clients of mine. So that's great leverage because then the person can really go in and say, hey, if you want me to leave this other position, you know, we're gonna need to talk about what that's going to look like, in my compensation. And then with competing offers, this is another area that I think there could be mistakes that are made. People should never lie about another offer, make it up. They will be found out. But if there is another offer, it's totally fine to go back to an employer and say, hey, I have another offer. I'm really excited about your organization. They've offered me X. If you match it, I'm ready to accept now. That's the carefully and tactfully part of it, right? Nobody ever wants to feel that they've been played. Very, very bad idea. Very bad idea. But the other thing is to use other offers to showcase, hey, somebody else is interested in me. They want me. I'm good. They recognize the skills that I bring to this position. Totally fine to share that with another employer. So I have no issue with that. Okay. I'm going to take this off share. Here's my contact information. Again, happy to connect with anybody. I wanted to give a few minutes, and I've left us only 4, to see if there's any questions that I can answer.
We do have some questions, Jen.
Okay.
So someone has asked their supervisor for higher pay, which they feel is fair for the amount of work they do and the results they deliver. However, they've been told there's no money in the department budget to increase their pay. What should they do at this point?
If there's no money, there's no money. But what you can say is, I understand that that's the company's present financial position. I'd like you to consider when money is available, whether or not, money can be allocated to a raise given what I bring.
And do you have any tips on books or resources to suggest to clients to learn more about negotiation?
I think my favorite book is called Getting to Yes. It's an oldie but a goodie. Getting to Yes. I'm sorry, I don't know the name of and it's, by the way, I think this big. it's like a Elements of Style. It's a very small. I think it's a great book to read where people can easily digest it and very quickly. I don't even know that I'm sure there are better ones out there, but that's something that I read way back when I started out as a lawyer, and it left an impression on me. So I have that recommendation.
And any advice for the client that is being promoted but being lowballed for an internal offer for a company where they already work?
The client should employ these tactics to ask about, why am I being offered this particular salary? And again, this is important. I'm so glad you think highly enough of me to give me the promotion, and I'm really excited, right? The gratitude. Oh, don't forget it. So important. And can you please explain to me why the company's offering me the salary that it's offering, and when can I expect to move up in the salary progression? Love that, because now they're going to take in information that they can then deploy to their benefit.
And I think we have time for 2 more, and then I'll give everyone that all-important CEU code.
Mm-hmm.
So someone needs to advocate for a report to receive compensation for obtaining additional certification. Is there a best way to go about this?
I think asking for a meeting and not doing this again over email, and the person should prepare themselves with those bullet points explaining why.
So if you're in the middle of, a negotiation and that something better does come up, is there ever proof of another offer that is asked for? You said that will often be found out. Is there ever proof of that?
That's a really hard question to answer. I would just say that it's really important to be very ethical about how you present that information, because you don't want to have somebody come back and say, this person, they didn't give me accurate information. So.
And someone just posted that Getting to Yes Amazon link, so everyone can grab the link to that book out of the chat.
Yeah.
And everyone will receive the slides and the recording from today's presentation. I know there was a question about Jen's contact information, so you will have that in the slides that you receive. It is 1 o'clock. The completion code today is salary 2024, and I will drop that in the chat. Salary, SALARY 2024. That's the code you can enter for one CEU. You got lots of positive feedback in the chat, Jen. So I
Oh,
think
great.
all 101 participants that joined us today really appreciated the information you shared with us. Thank,
Fantastic.
thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar and you will receive the recording and the slides after we conclude today's session. Have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
day.
Thank you very much for having me. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.